Well, by now you've heard it 1,000 times. You've heard about the disastrous events to come as a result of global warming. We're going to dare to ask the big question today. Is it true? Is there actually global warming taking place right now? And if it's not true, then what's the motive? I mean, even the government continues to insist that global warming is a reality, that the oceans are going to melt, that the levels of the sea are going to rise, and that unprecedented flooding will take place. So I guess the first thing we need to do is find out if it's true. Now, I have a story today. This particular article comes from, of all places, Al Jazeera America, and it was published in October. And I just want to read a little bit to you. Many major U.S. coastal cities will face a huge surge in the number of tidal floods they experience as sea levels rise due to climate change, a new report has warned. The study, conducted by the Union of Concerned Scientists, covered 52 cities on the Atlantic and Gulf Coast from Portland, Maine to Freeport, Texas, and predicts a dramatic increase in flooding linked to high tides over the next few decades. According to the UCS report, over half of the cities surveyed in the study will see 3 times the number of tidal floods in the next 15 years than they do now. In 3 decades, when the sea levels are expected to have risen by at least 1 foot, 9 of the locations are projected to see a 10-fold increase to about 240 floods per year. Now, the article went on to say, we just know that climate change is real, and we know that the sea level is occurring, said Mowry. The city of Miami Beach is not talking hypotheticals. We are talking about action plans to save our city and maintain our city as a very vibrant and thriving area of our economy for the people of the world to come and visit. You know, I'm having flashbacks right now. I'm having flashbacks of the year 2000. We were being told that all the computers were going to malfunction. We were told that the railroad switches would not work, that the food of America was going to be stuck on railroad tracks and not able to reach the destination, that the store shelves would be empty. And I mean, this thing was being discussed from Dan to Beersheba. It was pounded on continually. And so we all rushed out and we all updated our computers. Well, we all know what happened. Actually, one year before the time hit, it actually was supposed to happen, I believe, in 2000, the breakover into 2001. So 1 year before, Endtime magazine published a big light bulb on the front of its cover with the caption, "Will the lights go out?" I mean, they were predicting that when these computers crashed, they would call for electricity and the electricity would rush towards the needed places, and that would trigger such a surge that it would black out all 3 of the electric grids of America, and that they wouldn't be able to get them back up for 50 years. I mean, we're going to be without electricity in the United States of America for 50 years, and astonishingly, people actually believed it. Well, we went to great extent back in those days, because I had a man appear on my program. He had a video he was selling called Millennium Bug. And so he would start telling us all this that was going to happen. So I asked my usual probing questions. I said, okay, now, what about this? What about this? What about this? He said, well, I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but I'm telling you it's coming. As soon as I was done with that program, I thought, there is something rotten in Denmark here because he evaded all of our hard questions. He just wanted to sell these DVDs. Well, I decided before we had another person on like that, and there were many of them in circulation at the time, they were everywhere, I decided that we would find the truth. So we began to do interviews. We did interviews of the heads of power grids. We did interviews with the chief person over transportation in the United States of America. We did interviews with heads of hospitals because all of their equipment was supposed to go crazy and people would die and everything that was being said. I mean, this was being circulated. It was being seriously promoted in major publications here in the United States. So we started doing these interviews. I believe we did about 60 hours worth of interviews. And when we got about 30, 35 hours into the interviews, my co-host at the time, Eddie Sachs, who had gone out and bought a generator for his home just in case, he looked at me and said, "This is not going to happen, is it?" And I said, "No, it's not going to happen." So that's when we wrote our article, "Will the Lights Go Out?" And we actually gave word for word quotes from the people we had been talking to. For example, one of my personal friends who was on the global warming kick, he was publishing on the internet, his following was building, everybody was panicking, and he said to me, "Well, you know that all of the railroad switches are electromagnetic, and these electromagnetic switches have uncompliant computer chips in them, and so consequently, when the date hits, they're going to quit functioning, and they're not going to be able to put the railroad cars where they need to, and that's going to cause a food shortage, and there's going to be rioting in the streets," and on and on and on he went. I said, okay, there's something wrong with this picture, because if I'm president of the United States and I've got the food of the country at stake, I'm going to call in the National Guard. I'm going to put one at every single switch in America to throw those switches by hand if they have to keep the food being delivered to this country. Well, I said this to this man. He said, "Won't work because there are no hand controls on the switches. They're all electromagnetic." So the next step, I just made arrangements for a very high official in the railroad business to interview with us. So I asked him, okay, these are true or false questions. Number one, are there in fact electromagnetic or computer chips in your electromagnetic switches for the railroad? He said, there are no computer chips in our switches. They're all electromagnetic. I said, question number two, there are no manual overrides. He said, false. All of our switches have manual overrides. As a matter of fact, I think he said 1/2 or 2/3 of them were all manual. Well, when I began to find out these facts, I realized that America was being duped, and actually the whole world was being duped because of this theory concerning the year 2000 crisis, the computer crisis that supposedly was going to happen. We interviewed the head of the Power and Light Company in Richmond, Indiana, where I lived at the time, and I said, okay, let's just say that your computers wrongly call for a surge of electricity. What's going to happen? He said, well, it's going to throw the breakers. If there's too much electricity coming in, we have breakers that lead into Richmond Power and Light system. It's going to throw the breakers. I said, okay. Now, when those breakers are thrown, do you have a backup? He said, yes, we have a diesel engine here at our power plant, and it is a backup. I said, so how long does it take you to get the backup going? He said, less than 1 hour. I said, so Richmond, Indiana is going to be back in electricity if everything goes down in less than 1 hour? He said, absolutely. Well, those were the kinds of responses we kept getting every single place we turned. And so the question is, how is the public so gullible to fall for these rumors, these unsubstantiated rumors? And I mean, I went to our national conference the next year, and what did they devote our closed ministerial meeting to? The potential of global warming. And I heard a man get up there, and I suppose the man thought he knew what he was talking about, and he sucked in a lot of the ministers that were there that day. But I sat there and listened to him say one thing that was not true after another, after another, after another. It was all mythology that someone through the media kept beating the drum for. I had people come to me that had read our magazine. Immediately after that meeting, ministers from around the nation, they looked at me and said, is this going to happen? I said, no, it's not going to happen. They said, we didn't think so. But at the same time, this was going on all over the world. Okay, well, wind the clock ahead now to 2014. We're hearing the drums beat again. Global warming. Well, I just read some of it to you. I mean, we're going to have crises that are whole cities are going to be destroyed. We're going to have crisis after crisis. And President Obama just recently declared that he's going to conclude a climate change agreement with the world. And if the Congress will not pass it, he's just going to enact it unilaterally anyway. Now here the president of the mightiest nation on earth has bought into this global warming myth. Now you may be asking right now, do you know for sure it's not true? Yes, I do. I did the research. I know for sure it's not true. How do I know? Number one, there's been no warming over the last 18 years. Zero. None. Even though carbon emissions have been rising quite rapidly. Supposedly when carbon emissions rise, the temperature rises with it. It's not happening. Now I've got another absolute proof for you, but I want to give that to you when we get back. But the more important question is not is there global warming, but if there's not, then what's the motivation for trying to sell this idea to the world? Now that's what we really need to know, and that's what we're going to talk about before we're done on the program today. So stay with us.